Hello and welcome along to another episode of our Stadium Review series, Review the 92. Each week, myself and co-host Tom talk about a different football ground we visited in the English 92 and rank it on certain areas, as well as discussing our experience there. So this week, after a couple of big FA Cup ones, we're back to league action. And I think I mentioned earlier in the series, this is the one where I felt like Luton had got back to the Football League, had got back to the big time. Because I'm, of course, talking about Fratton Park, which we visited in 2015 in our first year back in the Football League, as our playoff hopes were just dwindling with Luton Town. However, still a good season, still a good ground, and we've got plenty to talk about. So if you're looking forward to this episode, please do put a thumbs up on it. Subscribe down below for a new episode every week as we take you through the stats of Fratton Park. I'll start with the little stats that you like, which are the quirky ones, which is that Portsmouth's ground, Fratton Park, is the only one that is not on British mainland in the English Football League.
There you go. I like that a lot. So where is it technically located?
So it is on the ground of Portsea Island, where the city of Portsmouth is located.
So the whole of Portsmouth is on that island?
It's not on British mainland, correct.
Okay, right. I was going to say, I don't remember having to cross water to get from our hotel to the ground. So all of Portsmouth's off the mainland.
Not
okay, that makes sense.
On the mainland island of Great Britain. So it's the only English professional football club where that's the case. In terms of the normal stats, it was built in 1899, which is a very old ground, possibly one of the oldest of the series. It was opened the same year. It has a capacity of 20,620, currently reduced to 19,670 for health and safety reasons. So not sure, probably segregation or certain seating. And the record attendance was in 1949 against Derby County, and it is 51,385. That's a lot of people to fit into that little ground. But obviously, as we mentioned...
Would have been snug, wouldn't it, that night?
Oh, it would have been snug indeed. But as we mentioned, we went in 2015 to watch Portsmouth v Luton, a comprehensive home win, and a few interesting names from the lineup, particularly given what's happened to Portsmouth this week. So starting for Luton was Cameron McGeehan, who is the unfortunate man in Portsmouth team this week, who missed the deciding penalty in the playoff semi-final. So what did you think of the day and the occasion initially?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. What you said at the beginning, that going to Portsmouth, a club that were in the Premier League for much of the time as we were growing up as kids, and obviously famously won the FA Cup. So it did feel like Luton Town were back playing. I want to be careful with my choice of wording here, because I was going to say a respectable club, but that's maybe unfair.
That's not the right word, no.
No, forgive me, I need a thesaurus.
A reputable club. More reputable.
Yeah, just from the higher echelons of English football.
Yes.
Yeah. And it did feel like a big trip out. And again, I've probably, as you said, going back 5 years, I hadn't been to that many grounds probably around the country at that point. No, I think we went to a few, didn't we, that season? And
so we went to Southend just after. We did the seaside ones that year. We didn't do many in the first year back up. No. Stevenage, I think, was the other one, and Cambridge.
So I was still living in Luton, so ones that are fairly local in the south, and then a bit further having to get the sort of hotel out, which was a bit of a novelty. The hotel wasn't amazing. We won't name names, but wouldn't recommend the company we went with.
Well, you might not name names. I was going to say this was probably the only regret I have of the weekend, is because we were sort of just past college and you were still uni student age, we were talking about saving money. So
budget options only.
Unfortunately, we decided to save £6 by not going to Travelodge and going to the neighbouring Ibis budget. And for that, you don't get a mattress, which is probably what the biggest difference was for me. You know, I'm a man. I don't need much in a hotel, but I just need a comfortable bed and a little TV to watch Match of the Day. And I didn't have a comfortable bed, so I was very unhappy. And let's be honest, there was nothing in that room that wasn't plastic.
No, this is a podcast that's meant to compare football grounds, not hotels. But we did go for a budget option in Cardiff. I think is it called a Zip?
Yeah, Premier Inn Zip, yeah.
And that's an alternative, the cheap option. We were quite impressed with that. So it is possible to do a budget option and be quite satisfied. Ibis did not manage it on this occasion.
No.
Perhaps they've improved their service. Who knows?
Let's hope so. But anyway, let's move on to the football ground itself, because obviously, as you mentioned, we spent the weekend there. We'll talk a bit about Portsmouth as we go along as well. Although, of course, because the ground isn't in the main city centre, we didn't actually see much of the main city. But the area we were in, we saw a bit. We had a very good an Indian restaurant meal, which obviously is an important thing to me for anyone who's watched this series.
Mm-hmm.
But Fratton Park itself was on the doorstep of the hotel, and it's a proper old school ground, isn't it? So it's going to have a lot of the features that we talk positively about in this series.
Yeah, undoubtedly has character when we come to that. And as you just told us all, it's very old.
Yes.
Yeah, the whole turn of the century. Yeah, it's historic. I remember as a kid the TV angle, obviously.
Yeah.
Like when they're on TV a lot when they're in the Premier League, and I think from the gantry, there's like almost an obscured shot, I think, wasn't there, where they had the gantry? That kind of sticks in my mind growing up.
And you also had, like, the one I remember is obviously that famous Soccer Saturday clip with Chris Kamara with the red card. And obviously he's down by the corner because they didn't actually have, their early Premier League years, enough equipment, space and media hospitality for people to be in the media suite as such. So it was proper old school. It was built for fans when it was just everyone's a normal fan and comes to the ground. And that's one of the things I like about it. But I guess we better move on to the 4 areas instead of waffling on about Indian food and seats. So what did you make of the atmosphere that day?
Again, we're talking 5 years ago, so it's quite a long time, but I think it was a good atmosphere. I would imagine. Did you say how many Luton fans turned up?
So the attendance of the game was nearly 17,000, and it included nearly 3,000 Luton fans. So obviously for Pompey, they were at their probably lowest point at that time. The financial trouble had just been resolved. The fan took over. So for them to still nearly fill it against Luton is incredible. And for the Luton fans, there was a great atmosphere. So, I mean, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I remember thinking, I do remember that now, 17,000, thinking that's fourth tier of English football, and they're getting 17,000 fans in the ground.
Oh yes.
You compare that to like other European countries where maybe even first division clubs, maybe in the likes of France and Spain, wouldn't get 17,000 fans in. So fair play to Portsmouth, and still well done Luton fans. I guess like we thought it's a big away day in the league for the first time in a few seasons, and we're going to make the most of it. So yeah, I think the atmosphere was good. Am I right in thinking there's a drum at Portsmouth?
There is a drum, I'm afraid. Obviously, they've got a famous fan in Pompey.
And the guy with the bell. Yeah, so it did generate a bit of an atmosphere. I don't think we saw much trouble around it. Did a few Luton fans?
There was a little scuffle after the game, but we weren't really near it. So
no, quite an impressive atmosphere. I think I'd give it an 8. What was your recollection?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was much the same. I just remember it being... It's hard to judge it on certain areas because I just remember as a Luton fan, after spending years at, with the greatest respect, proper non-league clubs with more away fans than home fans, as we mentioned on a couple of occasions, to then be back at a stadium like that, it's very hard to then be fair because it was probably the first massive step up in terms of scale of occasion for a Luton fan on the away road. So for me, I would match you and give it an 8. The one thing I would say for Pompey is I've seen them away this year at MK Dons, and I mean, the away following was ridiculous. They were getting battered 3-0 and they just went from first minute to last. It was incredible. So a very good fan base.
Do you know how many they, sorry to interrupt, do you know how many they took?
I think it's about 5,000, 4,000 or 5,000, which...
It's fantastic.
And that was the 28th, 29th December as well, by the way. So incredible support.
Amazing.
Yeah, a great club. Obviously, they'd only won the FA Cup 7 years earlier, and the fans stuck with them as they went down. So you've got to be fair there. But we should move on, as we normally do, to location. Now, as we said, this is a bit of a hard one for us because it wasn't near the city centre, but it was very near where we were staying, and we were there for the weekend. So it's a bit of a difficult one to judge in terms of walk and convenience to get to train stations, etc.
So we stayed in the area of Fratton, didn't we?
Yeah.
We didn't stay in Portsmouth, and I don't think we even saw Portsmouth.
No.
Which, looking back, is a regret because I know my mum and dad have been down, and like they said, the harbour's like really nice, and apparently got a lot going for Portsmouth, and I would like to see it. I can't say I've done it.
No. And
I think that's probably that's completely our fault. We didn't make the most of the opportunity, and again, we were 5 years younger and hadn't done so many away days, so maybe we were a little bit naive, ignorant, didn't really venture out of the close proximity to our lovely accommodation. So perhaps, in all likelihood, Luton will be in the same league as Portsmouth next season. Possibly, so perhaps we'll do it again, and maybe we'll see more of what Portsmouth has to offer.
Yeah.
Maybe do one of those walking tours if there's any going by then.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have to bear in mind it was mid-March, freezing and raining most of the time, if I remember rightly. So we did have some slight mitigating circumstances. But yeah, it was a bit of a weird one. It's very hard to judge. It is a long way from the city centre, obviously. So if you're going by train and things like that, you would need to get a bus, you would need to get a whatever else to get there, a taxi. So that has to bear into it because that adds to the cost of a match day experience. But
Hmm.
for us, and I presume most football fans as well, it's so isolated down in the south corner of the country that most fans would probably stay overnight and make a weekend of it.
Yeah, you'd imagine so, wouldn't you? It's probably got. We didn't really sample any of it, but I would imagine it's a university town. It's probably got a good nightlife, bars.
Yeah.
I bet it would be by the sea.
And obviously, we saw even where we were, there were good restaurant choices and things like that as well. So,
Yeah. So you could definitely do a good weekend down in Portsmouth if you wanted to make a good trip of it, and perhaps next time we will do a better job of having a trip down to the south coast.
so what do you reckon in terms of number are you going to give it?
I'll have to play it safe with a 7, just because, yeah, we didn't do it from the heart of Portsmouth, and we booked our accommodation with knowing where the ground was in mind.
Hmm.
So it's relative. So I'm just going to play it safe and give it a boring old 7 here.
So I'm going to have to, and I know this seems a bit harsh given what we've said, but I have to give it a 6.
You make me have doubts about my 7 now. Maybe I'm just in a generous mood.
Obviously had a good day, but let's move on to value and see if you're still feeling as generous. So prices for this game, which I was frantically searching for as I'd realised I'd forgotten as we were going through location, were £20 for adults. I believe, based on the age groups, up to 22 was a young adult, and I would have still been 22 then. So I only had to pay 15 for that day, I believe, but you would have unfortunately been 23 at that point. So £20 for adults, we have to judge it on that price. How would you rank that for Fratton Park, but then still a League Two fixture?
I did have a tendency to try and get away with the lower priced tickets when I was around that age because I'm short and I used to look quite young for my age. So I did push it, didn't I? I might have tried to get a cheap ticket too, but
Don't
yeah.
know. Don't know. That's the place you want to admit that.
And 20 quid 5 years ago, League Two. It's not great, is it?
It's
I
probably
think
the
we've had
upper end of average, if we're being
I think
honest.
the last couple of episodes we've been really impressed because they've been cup games and the big teams have been giving them away,
Yeah.
trying to encourage bums on seats. Whereas this is a bit steeper, but still had a great attendance. So they got away with it. But yeah, I think I'd have to give that a 6. It's not a great price, is it?
And that's the thing, again, where it's hard to be fair because it's the first time, as we mentioned, you're going to a big ground after a while. And most Luton fans will just say, we're going to Portsmouth. It doesn't matter. A bit like probably the Leeds one that just got called off before the lockdown. It was a
Yeah,
ridiculous price, but everyone was going to go. I
within
don't think,
reason.
yeah,
Price isn't an object, obviously.
yeah,
Not
I,
50, 60 quid, but yeah, you will pay a bit more because it's the
yeah,
premium of going to a big stadium and a big club, right?
yeah. I don't think it's ridiculous that price, but it is at the upper end of average. So as a result, I'll probably stick the same and say it has to be a 6. But then I think for Category A games, which Luton would have been against Portsmouth, that's what Luton were charging at the time. So
Why do you think Portsmouth would see Luton as a Category A game? If Luton had been in the non-league for a few years and it's not really a
yeah,
rivalry between them.
I guess for the first season back in the Football League, they probably wouldn't have been, although they did have one of the biggest fan bases, which I guess if you're a home team putting ticket prices on, that's probably what you're thinking about. But again, for Luton the other way round, we would have had Pompey as Category A. So
Oh
their
yeah,
fans would have had to pay 20 as well. So I don't think we can really complain on that.
it's reciprocated. Yeah, you might be quite right, and it might have been a Category A game for them as well. But it's almost a compliment, and I don't really see why Luton would have been considered in that category, having just been a non-league team. But
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. Probably in terms of away following, they'd be in the top 6 in the league. You'd have
probably.
thought. So yeah,
I think we had the fourth highest attendance when we came back up at the lowest. So, I mean, they're certainly both clubs are very well supported for their size and for the size of the area. But as you say, probably it's the upper end of average, but I feel like it could have got away with a 7 if I was in a more generous mood still.
but we're matching each other on 6 here, are we?
We're sticking with 6. And then when we move on to the final one, where I think Portsmouth will probably score quite highly, which is character. I mean, it had all the features we go for. It had, you could see the parts of the city out the corner of the ground. It had an old school feel, but still had the quality to be a modern stadium. It was obviously Championship Premier League level. It was the home of FA Cup winners. There's lots of sort of memorabilia and flags and scarves and that going in about those sorts of joyous occasions not long before it. and I probably had to hold on to those at those points, given what had happened the 7 years after. But for me, character, it's right up there. Just being in the ground, it was brilliant. You had even the way that the stands were laid out, they were proper old school, but still fit loads of people in, which I loved it.
Am I right in saying that we were behind one goal and the stand opposite us is it's quite
Yeah,
steep, isn't it?
yeah,
It's a big stand, and I think that's maybe perhaps where the most vocal support is. If I might be wrong in saying that, but I've got a feeling that's where the famous Pompey fan sits,
yeah.
and yeah, they generate a lot of noise, and it's a great stand. And yeah, you're right. You just get a sense of the history and the prestige of the club, and it's definitely. I don't know. Do you ever hear talk about Pompey moving on from Fratton Park, like a bit like Kenilworth Road? Is it beyond past its sell by date, or is it?
I mean, I've not heard it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I don't follow
No,
the
but I
Pompey
guess
news daily, so.
I guess if it can still hold almost 20,000, it's not too small. And if they keep it refurbished, then why move on? I think I was very impressed with it at the time. Character wise, it's probably got to be a 9, hasn't it? I'm going to go 9. I think.
I mean, I'm edging towards that as well. One of the things I have to bear in mind is it's such an old school ground. It's a bit like what we said with Carlisle, which is yes, even if there is talk of them moving on, it would be a sad day if they did, because it's a proper old school ground, and I think a lot of neutral football fans would like going to Fratton Park, which I don't know if I'm just saying that because we did it in League Two, which was unusual. But for me, it just has so much about it that it's one of those that I would encourage any football fan to go to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think the same as you. I have to stick with a 9 at the very least. I can't quite give it a 10. It didn't have enough for that, but it's the best I can think of, and I can't give it a real negative. So I can't go lower than 9 as a result. So of course, our overall scores will be at the bottom. I've refrained from talking too much about our restaurant outings during that weekend, which you should be very proud of. If you did enjoy the episode, please do put a thumbs up on it. Subscribe down below for a new episode from this series every week. Thank you to my co-host, Tom, for joining me as always.
Cheers.
And hopefully we'll see you next time.